What happens when a massive corporation takes on a small city? What happens when the lawyers come knocking, threatening lawsuits if you don't pay up? And what happens when all of this is over a small slab of pavement on the side of the ocean? In my previous video, I mentioned that tearing down the Vancouver seawall, which may be necessary to repair the environmental damage it has caused, would allow the District of West Vancouver to lord their Centennial Seawalk over their brethren. Believe it or not, thanks to one company, the Seawalk's future is in doubt. In 2017, users of the gorgeous Seawalk woke up to find signs splashed on their beloved slab of pavement. Ahem. Notice to the public. CN Acquisition Limited has commenced legal proceedings against the district, claiming that use of the Centennial Seawalk constitutes illegal trespass. That's right, you naughty people. Members of the public are cautioned that their legal right to use the Seawalk is in dispute. The district is currently taking steps to oppose CN's claims. While the district opposes CN's legal action, the district has been advised to reduce maintenance activities on the Seawalk to the level required for public health and safety. The district apologizes for any inconvenience caused to the public. That's right, all these people here? Trespassers. Or rather, the district's recreational path constitutes trespass. The railroad demanded payment of $3.7 million a year in rent for the public use of the Seawalk between 19th Street and 24th Street, a stretch of over 1 kilometer, which is on the railroad's land. The district had refused to pay and, after negotiations broke down, CN terminated their lease with West Vancouver and filed a lawsuit with the BC Supreme Court in February 2017. Needless to say, the public was outraged and didn't take too kindly to a multi-billion-dollar corporation based in Eastern Canada demanding so much money from taxpayers for the use of the land on which their prized recreational path sat on. The general consensus among the population of West Van was one of anger and indignation, with residents claiming this was a shakedown by CN designed to boost their bottom line at the expense of taxpayers, joggers, and dog walkers. After all, what chance could a municipality with fewer than 50,000 people have against one of Canada's largest corporations, even if that municipality is comprised of some of the wealthiest people in the country? Technically though, CN doesn't directly own the land. Instead, they lease the right-of-way on a long-term basis from the BC government as part of the BC Rail privatization more than a decade ago. That story, by the way, is so messed up it led to the RCMP raiding the legislature and several guilty pleas, and will no doubt need its own video in the future. According to the district, not only was the former government-owned landlord okay with the development of the Seawalk to commemorate Canada's centennial birthday in 1967, but there were never any issues surrounding the lease. Now, 50 years later, CN decided that something that hadn't been an issue should suddenly become an issue. Don't you just love new landlords? Returning to the story, CN was livid that the district had both developed part of their right-of-way for public use and hadn't paid any rent since 1994. Their lawyer argued this amounted to expropriation of private property without compensation. The railway wants the overdue rent payments they believe they are owed and any damages suffered. I'm not quite sure what those damages are, seeing how the rail line hasn't been ripped out of the ground and sold for scraps on the black market. But what do I know? The railway denied the claims of extortion and countered that they have been trying to amicably settle the situation since 2013 without attempting to block access to the path during the dispute. The railway claims that the lawsuit was the last thing they wanted to do, but were forced to do so because the municipality would not deal. Although it is important to point out that West Van had offered to pay $12,500 a year in rent, less than 1% of what the rail company was asking for. Now that's what I call negotiating. The disparity seems to stem from the fact that the railway is valuing the land based on the fair market value of the residential and commercial land around the line, which is very high. Over the last century, West Van went from a go-to spot for social gatherings and vacation cottages built along the waterfront to condominiums and apartment buildings to capitalize on the interest in the area. Since the Seawalk was built, property values have shot through the roof. West Van has a slightly different thought about all of this. After spending all night trying to come up with the blueprints, they were unable to figure out how to build a condo tower so close to the ocean, and decided a slab of pavement shouldn't be valued so high. In fact, under the current zoning, the disputed land cannot be developed for residential or commercial purposes. It can only be used for marine foreshore uses, which hardly command the same valuations. Less than 2 weeks after CN filed the lawsuit, West Vancouver ran to Daddy Trudeau for help. Okay, not quite. They filed an application with the Canadian Transportation Agency, or CTA, against CN. The CTA is an independent quasi-judicial tribunal and is most notably the venue where you can go and whine when an airplane loses your luggage and won't offer you sufficient compensation. Boring, right? Although in this case, the district asked the panel to grant them the authority to continue to use the Seawalk on CN's right-of-way without providing any compensation to the railway whatsoever. They also demanded that CN be branded as a bunch of bullies. Or at least I would have done so had I been in their shoes. CN was furious and argued the municipality was essentially trying to use the transportation agency to circumvent the lawsuit over the lease, their main focal point. CN's lawyers argued that a dispute over a lease should be handled by a regular court, not the CTA, since that's kind of what courts do. They also complained that West Van was effectively trying to rewrite their lease in the most favorable terms for the district with such a huge ask. Unfortunately, the hearing was a fiasco. The central point was whether or not the lease between CN and West Van was still in force. Essentially, the CTA could only intervene if the lease was not in force, and only the courts could decide that. Things ascended into farce when West Van argued that the lease was not in force, and CN argued the opposite. Funny enough, they were both arguing the exact opposite position in the real courts. Essentially, the CTA gave CN a technical victory. Regardless of the circus, I think the main point we must come back to is 1. Can CN ask for money on the property they are leasing where the previous owner was not collecting rent since 1994? Is that extortion, or is the District of West Vancouver simply trying to rewrite the lease because a new owner has decided to exercise their rights? And 2. If rent is owed, should that rent be based on the fair market value of the residential and commercial buildings nearby, or should the rent be significantly lower since the land the Seawalk is on can obviously not be used for residential or commercial development? At the end of the day, if the matter isn't settled, it will be for the courts to decide, and that will likely take a few more years to complete. Or will it? In September 2018, the district announced that a settlement with CN was imminent, and according to the mayor, the deal is, quote, very favorable for West Van residents. The district would be making a one-time payment for perpetual use of the land. And that is where the media coverage seems to have ended. But was that actually the end? We here at the investigative arm of Your Canadian Guide weren't satisfied and started doing a little digging. Our 30 subscribers demand to know the truth. Well, according to West Vancouver's website, the district signed a letter of intent in September 2018. Apparently, the district had resumed normal operations on the Centennial Seawalk the following month. The final update I could find was from May 2019, a full 2 years after the lawsuit was filed, that praised the work the two sides have done towards settling the issue. Even more interestingly, the notes to the financial statements for the district start by addressing the lawsuit as a contingent liability, then a couple years later note the non-binding letter of intent, and now simply state that they are working towards completing a settlement agreement with the intention of resolving the legal dispute entirely. And that was for fiscal year in 2020, which came out in June 2021. That's last month. So the situation may be almost resolved, but not quite yet, it would seem. Looks like the joggers aren't out of the woods yet. So what do we make of all this? I don't know. Well, I think both sides have some good points, but like this video, it's gone on way too long. Also, I think it's sad that something that started out as a celebration of Canada's 100th birthday descended into an expensive legal battle on Canada's 150th birthday. Maybe by our 200th birthday, we can all figure out how to get along again.